It was a quiet morning in Maple Ridge, the kind of American neighborhood where lawns are trimmed, fences are white, and everyone waves hello until the HOA gets involved. John Miller stood on his porch, holding something that meant more to him than the house behind him, a neatly folded American flag. It wasn't just fabric to him, it was memory, it was sacrifice, it was freedom. John was a retired Marine, 2 tours overseas, one in Afghanistan, one in Iraq. He'd lost brothers, men who never made it back. Every morning, when the sun rose, he raised that flag for them. But that morning, as the flag climbed toward the sky, 3 people watched from across the street, clipboards in hand, matching polo shirts, HOA badges shining in the light. The Homeowners Association, the neighborhood's self-appointed rulers. They whispered, pointed, and scribbled notes. To John, they were just neighbors. To them, he was a rule breaker. He didn't notice them at first. He just looked up, saluted the flag, and whispered, "For you, brothers." By noon, there was a letter taped to his door. HOA official notice. Flagpoles are not permitted without prior approval. Remove immediately. John read it twice, then laughed quietly. Approval? For flying the American flag on his own porch? He folded the paper, walked to his kitchen, and set it under a magnet on the fridge. He wasn't taking down anything. That night, he sat on his porch with a cup of coffee, watching the stars, the flag moving gently in the breeze. He remembered how, overseas, men had died for this symbol, how they'd saluted it in the desert heat before every mission. He thought, if I can survive mortar fire, I can survive an HOA. But he didn't know this was only the beginning. The next morning, there was another letter. This time, a fine, $200 for noncompliance. John stared at it, sighed, and shook his head. He walked back outside and looked up at the flag again. It waved proudly, almost daring the HOA to try. "No, ma'am. This is community unity." Cheers rise softly in background. The clip went viral overnight. Veteran fights HOA over American flag. Headlines everywhere. Local hero stands up for his rights. Flag controversy sparks national support. Thousands rally behind veterans' fight for freedom. Within 48 hours, donations started pouring in. Legal aid, media support, even letters from other veterans' families. John read each one with tears in his eyes. People he had never met were thanking him, not just for fighting the HOA, but for reminding them that freedom starts small, sometimes right outside your front door. That night, John sat on his porch again. Same cup of coffee, same quiet sky. Only this time, he wasn't alone. Neighbors sat with him, laughing, sharing stories, proud. The flag above them swayed gently, catching the moonlight. It had been through war, wind, and pettiness, and still, it stood tall. But deep down, John knew this wasn't over, because when power feels threatened, it fights back harder. It had been a week since John's story broke across America. The flag still waved high above Maple Ridge, but now, so did the tension. The HOA wasn't backing down. In fact, they doubled down. They sent lawyers, letters, and legal threats. John picked up the new notice from his doorstep. "You are hereby summoned to attend a disciplinary hearing regarding multiple violations of HOA policy." He smiled. So this is how they want to play it. The next day, the HOA board gathered inside the community hall. The place was full. Residents, reporters, even veterans in uniform. Mrs. Parker sat at the front like a queen on her throne, papers neatly stacked, eyes cold as marble. John walked in calmly, wearing his old service jacket, the same one he wore when he came home from war. The room went quiet. He didn't come to fight. He came to speak. "Mrs. Parker," he began softly, "I understand rules. I spent 20 years following them. But when a rule stops protecting people and starts controlling them, that's not order, that's power." Room murmurs softly. "This flag." He looked toward the door, where sunlight poured in through the glass, hitting the stars and stripes. "This flag isn't a decoration. It's a memory of brothers I buried, of freedom we bled for. You call it a violation. I call it a promise that no matter what, this country stands tall." Applause begins softly from the veterans. Mrs. Parker banged her gavel. "Order. This is not a political rally." But her voice was drowned out by clapping. The crowd wasn't just listening, they were feeling. Crowd sound fades, slow heartbeat like drum rises. The HOA's lawyer stood, trying to regain control. "Mr. Miller, the HOA has bylaws that all residents agreed to. These rules ensure uniformity and community harmony." "John, harmony isn't everyone looking the same. Harmony is everyone being free and still standing together." Crowd reacts approvingly. The media captured every word, every glance, every flicker of pride on John's face. Then something unexpected happened. An elderly woman, Mrs. Jenkins, the oldest resident in Maple Ridge, stood up. "My husband died in Vietnam," she said, voice trembling, "and I keep his flag in my living room. If that's against the rules, then maybe the rules are wrong." Crowd erupts with emotion, clapping, cheering softly. One by one, people began standing, holding tiny flags, speaking up. It wasn't just John anymore. It was everyone. Mrs. Parker looked around, realizing she had lost control. Her rulebook didn't matter anymore. The people had spoken. She stood up, face red with frustration. "This meeting is adjourned," she snapped. "But this isn't over." John, quietly, "You're right. It's not. It's just beginning." Scene shifts. Outdoor ambience. audience, news vans packing up. That night, the video from the hearing went viral. Tens of millions watched it across the country. Veteran defends American flag against HOA. Freedom versus bureaucracy. Small-town hero inspires a national movement. Even members of Congress spoke about it. Celebrities reposted it. And flags began popping up across neighborhoods nationwide. Each one a silent thank you to John Miller. Soft wind blowing, flags flapping. But behind the spotlight, John stayed humble. He didn't seek fame. He only wanted fairness. As he sat on his porch once again, he looked up at the flag. Its colors faded a little, edges worn, but still strong. He whispered, "You've seen worse, haven't you?" Gentle chuckle. "We're still here." In that moment, he realized something simple. The flag didn't just stand for freedom. It stood for endurance, for unity, for people who refused to be silent. But deep down, Mrs. Parker had one last card to play. A legal one. A dangerous one. She wasn't going to lose her control without a fight. And the next move she made would change everything. 2 weeks later, John Miller stood once again, not in his yard, not in a community meeting, but in front of a judge. The HOA had officially filed a lawsuit against him. Violation of neighborhood covenant and refusal to comply with association regulations. To most people, it was just legal jargon. But to John, it was a fight for freedom. Not the kind you win with weapons, but with words, truth, and courage. On one side of the courtroom sat the HOA board, Mrs. Parker leading them like a commander, her lawyer whispering strategy in her ear. On the other, John sat alone. No fancy lawyer, no legal team. Just him, a few veterans in the back row, and that same quiet strength that never left him. "Judge, court is now in session." The HOA's lawyer stood first, confident, polished. He held up pictures of John's flagpole like evidence from a crime scene. "Your Honor," he began, "Mr. Miller knowingly installed the flagpole without approval, violating HOA Section 3A. The association only seeks compliance to maintain community standards." Pause, echoing silence. The judge nodded slightly, taking notes, then looked at John. "Mr. Miller, your response?" "John, Your Honor, I didn't install that flagpole to defy anyone. I put it there to honor the people who gave their lives for this flag. I served 20 years to protect it, and I'll be damned if I need permission to raise it in the country they died defending." Crowd murmurs with emotion. The judge raised a hand to quiet the room, but even he couldn't hide the faint look of respect in his eyes. "Your Honor, this isn't about property lines or policy codes. It's about what that flag means. To me, to my neighbors, to every American who ever looked up at it and felt proud. You can call it a violation, but I call it a reminder that freedom isn't neat or uniform. It's messy, it's hard, and it's worth every inch of fight we've got." Light applause from back of the room, quickly silence. Mrs. Parker crossed her arms, whispering something angrily to her lawyer. He frowned. He could feel the case slipping. "Your Honor," he said, "this is not a patriotic debate. It's a simple matter of compliance. If everyone ignored the rules, the neighborhood would fall into chaos." "John, with all due respect, sir, this flag is the reason you even have the right to make rules. Without it, none of this would exist." Audience gasps slightly. Judge strikes gavel. "Judge, order. I will have order in this courtroom." Then, something unexpected happened. John reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn-out photograph. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "these are my brothers. We raised that same flag in the desert after a firefight. Half of these men never made it home. So when I raise that flag, I'm not breaking a rule. I'm keeping a promise." The courtroom fell silent. Even Mrs. Parker lowered her eyes. "Judge, Mr. Miller, I believe I've heard enough. The court finds that the Homeowners Association has overstepped its authority. Federal law protects the right of every American citizen to display the United States flag." Case dismissed. John closed his eyes, relief washing over him. The veterans in the back stood and saluted. Even the judge gave a respectful nod. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and neighbors cheered. But John didn't say much. He just looked up at the sky and smiled. "We did it, boys." Wind blowing softly, flag waving. By evening, news spread across the nation. Veteran wins court battle over HOA. Freedom triumphs. The video of the verdict went viral. People shared it, cried over it, talked about it in schools, churches, and homes. And across America, flagpoles began appearing again, tall, proud, and unapologetic. Back in Maple Ridge, Mrs. Parker quietly resigned a week later. The HOA board changed its policies, permanently protecting the right to display the flag. One evening, a little boy from down the street walked up to John's porch. He was maybe 8 years old, holding a tiny flag in his hands. "Mr. Miller, my dad said you're a hero." "Nah, kid," John said, smiling. "The real heroes never came back. But I'll tell you what, keep that flag high, no matter what anyone says." The boy nodded and ran off, waving his flag in the sunset. John leaned back, eyes on the horizon, the American flag fluttering above him. A symbol that no rulebook, no board, no law could ever silence again. Final line, calm and proud, because in the end, freedom doesn't need permission. Months passed. The cameras disappeared, the reporters stopped calling, and Maple Ridge went back to quiet suburban life. But something had changed, not just in that small neighborhood, but across the country. A quiet wave of pride was sweeping through backyards, porches, and front lawns. In towns across America, some bought new ones, some simply hung a folded flag in their window. They weren't trying to make a statement. They were remembering what it means to belong, to stand for something greater than yourself. John still woke up early every morning, poured himself a cup of coffee, and stepped outside onto his porch. He looked up at that same old flag, edges worn, colors slightly faded, but still strong against the sky. Every day he saluted it. Every day he whispered the same words, "For you, brothers." But now, there was something new. He wasn't alone anymore. All down the street, his neighbors had put up their own flags. The same HOA that once forbade and now hosted an annual Patriots Day parade. Children marched with tiny flags in their hands. Veterans stood proud at the front gates, cheering, laughter, light drums. The community that once fought over rules was now united by something simple: respect. Time moved on. John grew older. The gray in his hair turned silver, his steps slower, his voice softer, but his spirit never faded. One summer afternoon, he sat on his porch as a car pulled into his driveway. Out stepped a young man in uniform, the same boy who'd once brought him a tiny flag years ago. "Mr. Miller?" he said, smiling. "I joined the Marines." John looked up, eyes watering just a little. "You did?" "Yes, sir. Because of you. Because you showed me what it means to stand for something." John nodded slowly. He reached up and handed the young Marine a folded flag from his lap, the same one that had started it all. "Take it," he said quietly. "It belongs to your generation now. Keep it high." The young man took it with both hands, eyes shining. He saluted John, then walked away toward his car, the flag resting against his heart. Fading to quiet evening, cicadas singing. That night, John sat alone on his porch one last time. He watched the sun set behind the flag his neighbors had raised in his honor. He smiled. "Looks like you're in good hands now," he whispered. As the sky turned gold, a soft breeze lifted the flag higher. It was as if the country itself was breathing, alive, grateful, free. Years later, on Veterans Day, Maple Ridge renamed its main street Miller Way. Crowd cheering, band playing, "America the Beautiful." At the dedication ceremony, that same young Marine stood on the stage. He unfolded John's old flag and raised it into the sky. "For Mr. Miller," he said, "and for every American who remembers that freedom is earned, not granted." Somewhere, in the quiet of that moment, you could almost hear John's voice again. "Freedom doesn't need permission." Soft echo of those words, fading into the wind. And the flag, once nearly torn down, now stood higher than ever, casting its shadow over a town that finally understood what it stood for. Final voice, calm and emotional. One man raised a flag to honor the fallen. A community learned what it meant to stand together. And a nation remembered, freedom is not a rule to obey, it's a spirit to protect. This was John Miller's story, but it belongs to every American who still believes in the power of the flag. Not Mrs. Hardwick, but next time maybe ring the bell before entering someone else's land. Oh, and by the way, your lease renewal's coming up. I'd be happy to discuss it next week. Her face went white. She didn't know she was a tenant in my building now. That shut the gate on her power trip.